From Tragedy to Triumph, Awakening My Broken Brain. That's the title of Jessica Taylor's memoir, and she is here today to talk about her experiences. I'm Jennifer Regular, your host, and so delighted to welcome each and every one of you tuning in to Awaken and Ascend today. Jessica, I understand that your story is not just a book. It's this very act of writing it that's created this fundamental change and has been a critical part in your healing process, especially as an injured brain re-educated yourself and learning how to come to grasp with the issues of survival, which is absolutely phenomenal. Understanding the universe on a deeper level and yourself in the most fundamental way. And I'm so honored that you're here joining us today. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was such a big transition from the Jessica before and the Jessica after. It was like after the immediate injury, which was extensive on the right side of my brain, my head. Well, of course, the whole brain gets injured with one impact, one heavy impact. All of the brain gets injured, not just one area. But the physical part was on my skull on the right-hand side, about 5 inches. But the transformation in me was like unbelievable. I didn't remember anything afterwards. I didn't even know my 2 daughters or my husband. And when this man came to the hospital and said he was my husband, I thought, who the hell are you? I don't like you, you know? So this is a kind of personality change that happens to brain injured people. And there's not enough research done at all in the world. Back injuries get more preference than a brain injury. And to me, there's nothing worse. You have to experience it to know what it's like. You lose yourself. You don't know who you are. You don't know anything about the world. It's like, for me, it was like coming back to being on a strange planet, where I just didn't understand language, people. I mean, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't cook. I had to get help from my own mother, because there was no help from the hospital or, any medical people coming to the house to explain to my husband and my children. There should be a go-between for people, where they can say, this is what's happened to your mother, expect this or that, and expect this change in personality. And, because my husband just thought I was gone nuts. When the average person doesn't understand brain injury, how could they when they don't have one, And that's where education is badly, badly needed. Badly needed. But I had weird things happen to me in the early stages. I would sit on a chair when people were talking to me, and I would hold on to the seat because I felt I was zooming out in space.
Oh, yeah.
Like strange metaphysical things happening. I had a fear of the house that my husband and I were renting. I just was petrified of it. And even when I was sent to a beautiful house in California to cousins to help me in the early stages, because it was winter, November 15, when I had the injury, 1969. So Ken sent me to very wealthy cousins in California. And instead of it being an absolute joy for me with their beautiful swimming pool and fabulous house and, being a guest of theirs and being treated like royalty, it was nothing but fear. Just petrified of their house. But we had a little comedy to track back. Thank goodness readers say that they cried throughout my story, but they also laughed. So there's quite a bit of comedy as well, thank goodness. And it made me laugh when I was writing as well. I mean, sometimes the tears would be falling down onto the keyboard, but then another time I'd be laughing. But they asked me, my cousins asked me why I had such a fear of houses. And I told them that I lived in a place where there were no houses at one time in my life. Then doing research, I realized I was actually remembering what it's like on the other side.
Oh.
That is that I was memory because I was on another dimension. I know I went on to another dimension. It's like consciousness maybe raised or something. Because, you know, consciousness, I believe anyway, that we're all one through the universal consciousness that exists. And I mean, I've studied that years later, but I was also, I had to learn how to cook, and a friend would put back, front on the left and the right, because I couldn't memorize what to do. And I actually left my husband. Unfortunately, there was a wicked stepfather story, and that wasn't funny. But there are some humorous things that happened there in their house, and my mother had to find a place for me to rent near her so that she could sneak out, because he was very possessive of her and he didn't want her helping me. Yeah, so that was another big disaster. And like I said, the fact that there is no, you know, the government should be sending a go-between, somebody who knows and understands brain injury and what can happen to a person, and counsel the whole family and the brain injured person themselves. But unfortunately, the hospital that I was in had no MRI or CAT scan, and my husband unfortunately had no insurance. So I was sent out, literally sent out into the world with, you could say, an undetected brain injury, even though they had said it was brain injury.
And this was back in 1969, did you say?
Yeah, 1969. And not only did I have fear of houses, I would get into the bath, and nobody said, don't stay in there too long, the water will get cold.
In the bath, yeah.
Yeah, I had no concept of time whatsoever.
Oh.
You know, and the water would be freezing cold for me to get out of the bath. Not enough hot water to add to it. And I'd go into a shop to get clothes, to buy some clothes. And the assistants would have to come in and say, you know, you've been in here for an hour.
Oh, wow.
I had no, you know, no concept of time whatsoever. But one of the tragedies at the hospital was the fact that the people around me all seemed like old folk. And I was just 31. But
wow.
They frightened me. They scared me. The noise of the curtains being pulled back was like trauma in its own right. Just noise affected me a great deal as well. And of course, depression didn't help. And I was put on barbiturates, 3 different pills, uppers, downers, and barbiturates for a period of 7 years. It was just a matter, give her pills and she'll be all right, you know, which I'm against as well. But then other things, good things happened. I would wake up in the night and I'd write tons of poetry.
Oh.
Now, whether this relates to maybe when I was at school, I was really good at writing plays and long essays.
Oh.
So it's like something stayed in there, in between those cells somewhere, or in the cells, and even became a bit clairvoyant. I would tell people something about their life and they'd say, good God, how the hell do you know that? You know, like, so but I have a theory about brain injury, that there's too much emphasis on the physical aspect, like the cells being injured.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the synapses that goes in between every brain?
Ah,
That
okay.
synapses.
Yeah.
And there's a synapses cleft. And I think that that should be studied. And I wrote that in my book. That should be studied intensely. Why would the synapses not get a whack as well as the cells?
Oh.
And nobody talks about that synapses that we have reaching from brain cell to brain cell, all over those hundreds of brain cells. But anyway, to get back to living with my mom. Well, first, like, to get back to being with my cousins in California. They were trying to stop me having such a fear of houses by putting their chaise lounge out in the back next to the swimming pool, facing the back of their house, which was so beautiful. And it turned into a comedy because I would move it so that I didn't have to look at the house and they'd come out and change it again. It was a bit of a comedy, to be honest. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And the poetry that I wrote, I have now, and some of them are absolutely amazing. Like, I don't seem to be able to write anymore ever since. It was like being on that other dimension.
Yeah.
That brought them about. Like, I became a spiritualist, you could say, instantly. And because another thing that happened, everything was erased that was negative from my brain.
Oh.
Hatred, envy, greed, jealousy, all of those, they disappeared.
Wow.
They have never happened to me once in my whole life, and I'm 86 now.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like they just disappeared. And I think that's dimensional as well, that I went onto
Interesting.
another dimension. But
Yes.
a better one. I would say it's a higher one.
Sounds like it, yes. To be in
Yeah.
your higher self rather than that lower self,
Yeah.
those low
Yeah.
vibrational energies. And Jessica, it sounds like every single day was a lifetime of survival in that day, you know, just getting through it, as you say, not even having awareness of time or temperature or what was happening, and absolutely no support and no advocacy in those years. And so what was it that gave you the link back to your brain, basically those synapses, and your creativity was part of that awakening? What
Yes.
else was it that supported you in being where you are today? And not just lost in that world that you spoke of so many years ago.
Well, I had to take to study simply because my memory was wiped clean. I knew nothing, no dogmas, nothing about the world, nothing about religions, nothing. Everything was gone. Everything was gone. And I was suicidal at the same time. So it was a matter of keep on going and do something creative as opposed to killing myself. You know, I slept with the barbiturates under my pillow for years. Actually, on that, there is a bit of a comedy. When I went over to England, as I said, to get help from my mother and this wicked stepfather, whatever. I used to go out dancing and at discos and not make a real display of myself. You know, I really did.
You were even an actress at one time as a child.
Yeah, I
Is
was
that
a
right?
child
Yeah.
actor, and show business is still in my blood. I never
Wow.
lose it. Like
Wow.
movies, I watch movies every single night of the year, of the week. And, you know, it's still there in my blood. And people have seen, when they read my story, they said, my God, this is a film. This is a movie. And there are other scenes in terms of a court hearing that we had that are like the case being called off and on again. And it's a movie in its own right. The case was called off at one time because the man who was accompanying me when I fell down those stairs onto a steel-plated door, by the way, had gone back to Italy. I don't know if he thought I was dead or what, but I have nothing against that man. He just didn't put the light on where I fell, and I just went head first down the steps.
Oh.
But the case was called off because they couldn't find him. And then the next thing, my lawyer's secretary was in a restaurant, and she heard his name mentioned by the secretaries at the next table, and found out that he was actually coming to Toronto for his divorce on a certain date. So my lawyer subpoenaed him at the airport. Therefore,
wow.
It was on again. Then the next time it was off, it was because they said, without the psychiatrist in England, without his report, we've no case, because they can't use a report from someone in England, which is ridiculous. And so off again. And then the next thing, it's a long story how this came about, so I won't hold you up and tell you, but it was established that this psychiatrist was actually teaching at a hospital in Toronto.
Oh.
He had emigrated and he was teaching at a hospital in Toronto. So case on again, because his report was included. So in terms of film worthy, it's not just everything that happened to me and my children and Ken, just amazing things. And of course, the court case itself was dynamic. A brain-injured person shouldn't be in a court case. And there were two lawyers. One lawyer was recommended. We weren't even thinking of doing anything like a court case. And it's some clients of mine at my studio. I had a Merle Norman Cosmetics studio before the accident, which I lost. Obviously, I couldn't run it. They had to be sold. But some clients had a lawyer and they said, we're going to recommend this lawyer to you and go and see him and talk and blah, blah, blah. The case was too big for him. So he had to quit and it went to the bar. And that's where a judge says, okay, a whole pile of lawyers are there. Who wants it? This is Jessica Taylor's story. Who wants it? Court. And the lawyer that said, I'm going to take it on, was a criminal lawyer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Was I a criminal or what the hell was going on? And that court case is so dramatic. It really is. The whole case is in my book. I've explained the whole thing.
Okay.
And there's another comedy where when I was in England, and befriended by a Scotland Yard detective who was a lovely man who used to go to my cousin's pub, a place that I established when my children were sent back to Ken because I couldn't look after them properly. I just went to London and heard some music in a pub. And when I went in, I found that the girl that owned it was my fourth cousin, Sarah. And I wrote a lot about her in the book as well. Yeah. And I had to have notes to find my way anywhere after that, how to get home, how to get there, everything else, and walk down steps like a cripple. I really slow, and I could see people were annoyed that I was walking so slow, you know, and you feel like shouting, leave me alone, I've had brain injury, but you know, you don't think to do anything like that. But in her pub, I mixed with some jazz musicians who said, you must go to Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, which is the most famous jazz club in all of the world. In Soho, England, people come from they hear the best, like Buddy Rich and Joe Jones, the biggest top stars in jazz, John Hendricks and Blam Jennings and Ross. And they befriended me.
No.
My father had been not only an actor, but a trumpet player. And so we kind of gelled with that information that I was able to give them. And they were so good to me that encouraged me, because they were highly intelligent people. And I was very weak mentally, very weak, just learning things again without being taught, just, meeting men, and they're all alcoholics and no good for me and all that kind of thing, because there's no supervision anywhere. But these jazz musicians I benefited so much from them. And one of them, Eleanor Jacquet, said, Jessica, you have to suffer to be beautiful, and you're beautiful inside and outside. And that just raised my hopes, the fact that these famous people were so fond of me. A lot of them have passed away now. But that was great. But I'm skipping here to the comedy. Then I had to leave England and go back to Canada. My Scotland Yard detective friend, good, you better get back there, and there's going to be a court case, and you've got to be ready for it and all the rest of it. And I had been to a doctor before leaving to the airport, and I said, look, it's going to cost me a fortune to get barbiturates over there. Can you give me some? He gave me a big bottle of them, and I was suicidal. Talk about temptation. But then the comedy was, when I got to the airport, they thought they were drugs, and they had to open my case and keep me there. And my Scotland Yard friend helped me out. And plus, I didn't have a passport. I didn't know things like that. I didn't know how to cope with anything without any tuition or help at all. And fortunately, Ken had me on his passport at the other end. So that got me back.
Wow.
And then some years later, I went back to England. I went to try and find myself. I was going to go back to Ireland, actually. And I had a beautiful boyfriend in Toronto. And I just walked out and left him. Like I left Ken to go to England to get help from my mother. But I had no idea of the time concept as an immigrant. I had to re-emigrate because I was away for 4 years. How was I to know that every 6 months I should have gone back? To keep my, And so those kind of pathetic things happened as well. And of course, my girls, when they were with Ken and away from me, one of them had nightmares. The other one, Debbie, my youngest, said she packed her bags one day and she said to her dad, her dad said, where are you going? You're packing your case. She said, I'm going to the airport to wait for Mom. And he said, well, where will you stay there? She said, I'll hide under the counter.
Wow.
This little 6-year-old, And it was pathetic, and it just broke my heart having to part with them. But I suppose my subconscious knew they needed better help, and he had a girlfriend then as well. So my subconscious knew that, they need to be in a better place than with their mother, who's probably playing with Barbie dolls like they were.
There's so much of our subconscious that rules our life, directs our life, basically. So it's very interesting for people with brain injuries, how that relates, right? How the subconscious comes into play, and how every day you were faced with so many obstacles, trying to survive, trying to understand anything, nonstop, being suicidal, and yet there was always a way through it somehow, and a connection you made, especially connection with people of shared values and interests, like the musicians, of the creativity that you mentioned through the poetry and singing and dancing and acting, all that creative function.
Energy came
still
out
available.
Yeah. Because when I danced, like, people stared at me, like, in a nightclub in London. The way I was dancing, one guy said, are you professional? Another one gave me his card and he said, if you can do that in a movie, get in touch with me. But I threw away the card because I said to my friends, it's probably a porno. I'm not interested. And
Yeah.
because I did it one time in my 20s, I used to sing in pubs just for fun. Because I had a good voice. I still have. And a talent scout picked me up for an RKO movie to be the singer in the background when the stars came in to dine. And I let that go. My dad would turn over in his grave if he knew what I was supposed to do in order to get that role, sleep with 2 or 3 of the guys. No, that's what women had to do in those days, way back. That's a long time ago, you know. And they did it because they were so desperate to get on screen. But I wasn't. Much as I knew I could have been another Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah. And now what you have done is written 2 books, right?
Yeah.
The Spiritual Awakening and Search of Hidden
Came
Jewels.
about
And
as a result of
yeah.
of my, well, it actually came about as a result of the fact that I lost all memory in my, after the accident. And I thought, okay, I've got to learn again rather than, and I think I tracked back to that earlier on. I'm jumping where
That's okay. And there is a whole episode on what led up to that book.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that, that podcast link, that episode to that is there for anyone watching right now and is interested in that story as well. And so right now there's the republishing of the book that actually came before, that's now coming again after, which is the Tragedy to Triumph. So share with us the triumph. When do you remember, are you able to remember that moment where you felt like you had your life, where you no longer felt suicidal, or do you still from time to time?
No, thank goodness that's gone.
Yeah.
And it was because I became a spiritualist. I did 20 years of study, which probably would have taken somebody else about 8 years. But everything I did and everything I learned took me longer than it would just the average person. And the study that I did for a spiritual awakening woke me. That's why I used the word awakening. It woke me up to life and what it's all about. I studied theology and found out that I got Vatican books in a beautiful little town called Ryde in the Isle of Wight, England. I mean, I traveled all over the place trying to find who I was and what's life all about. And I came across Vatican books with truths in them that the public are not told. And when I went back to Ireland to do some study, I was befriended by a Roman Catholic canon of the church, 90 years old. I'm not kidding you, I fell in love with him. If it hadn't been like 30 years age gap, I would have said, okay, now you're retired, you can leave the church and marry me. It was just beautiful, man. He was loving. But in a spiritual awakening, I have shared what he told me. And it's dynamic. He told me secrets that he was not allowed to tell his public, about what's being taught to clergymen. Was one thing, and hidden from their audience or whatever, their congregation.
Yeah, I remember that from the other episode.
Yeah, it just blew my mind. And
so what are the triumphs that you share in the book that's being re-released with the Tragedy to Triumph? What are some of those triumphs?
Well, what happened, what I learned and became a spiritualist.
Yeah.
That learning, and not only that, but 20 years of research woke up, I believe, it's my own guess, but I believe it was, I woke up the dormant neurons of my brain through all of that intensive work. Because the frequency of it as well, I believe, just woke up dormant neurons. I mean, we know we've only used 10% or so, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's got to be dormant neurons there that we can wake up. And I think that's what happened.
Amazing. Wow.
And
Wow. And all of this is in the book as well.
yeah, that gave me
Yeah.
like a new life, a new view on life. Like, I don't remember if I just ignored everything, the trees, the universe, the grass, the flowers. Well, I know I love flowers, but I don't know how I was in that respect before the accident. But
Mm.
after spiritualism, after all my years of study, then I learned to appreciate every little thing. Like, a cup of chocolate that you make at home
Oh,
would give
yeah.
me an aha moment,
Yeah.
Looking
Yeah.
out my garden gives me an aha moment.
Mm.
Just appreciating nature itself, in the universe, and understanding that we're all one, we're all part of the universe, because I firmly believe consciousness is it. Consciousness is what the church called God.
Mm.
I firmly believe it. And then I learned that so does not Deepak Chopra, but Tully, who is an amazing,
Eckhart Tolle. Yeah.
is an amazing teacher. Now he speaks a lot now about consciousness.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that we're all one. There should be no prejudice, no hatred, no all of these, things that are happening on the planet and wars and everything. It's just,
And what you spoke of that you lost, like you couldn't feel that judgment and prejudice and depression and anger anymore, that you were elevated into a new frequency of love and unity and reverence for life and
yes,
appreciation, gratitude, and all the things that, others are working really hard to achieve and doing the inner work. And there is such a rising of awareness now, of consciousness, of wanting
there is.
to
I'm glad about
elevate
that.
our lives. Yeah, it's very promising.
Yeah, it is. I think
Indeed.
it's really
Yeah.
good. There's hope for the future with this
Yeah.
emphasis on consciousness
Mm.
and that people. And I'm hoping that that the first book, my memoir, will open the doors for better healing for brain injured people, better support and everything else. As I've
It's a
been
beautiful
campaigning
gift.
1992,
Mm.
and then I'm hoping that the second book will enlighten people enough to understand more about consciousness and who they are and what they are, as well as who they are, because we're a what as well as a who. We're a soul that come into a body, but the body
Yes.
isn't the real us. The soul is the real, or they call the higher self, is the real us. And this is just a temporary way to work out our karma from life to life.
And you discovered yourself at the most fundamental level. You truly are, from the soul level.
Yeah.
And now this is what you're awakening in all of humanity. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful honor, I would say, of having you here sharing this, Jessica, and all that you've been through for over 50 years, and still on the journey and still every day, working with what memory capacity you have and the level of functioning you have, and knowing that you
Learning.
have and you're learning and trusting the process of life, trusting the universal connection that you have and all the metaphysical experiences that you had, and go into great detail with in the book. So of course we're going to have the links below for them. Is there anything else, Jessica, that you want to be able to share with the audience today, or you think is
Well,
important for them to know?
people think that the church don't believe in reincarnation, but yet what I discovered in their own encyclopedias, they have a name for it. It's called metempsychosis. And the translation of it in their own books is the soul transferring from body to body.
Ah,
But then that is not being taught. And why? Why it's not being taught
right.
is a big question.
This is your next book, Jessica. We'll wait for number 3.
Oh. I don't think so. Somehow I think I mean, you can imagine they took an awful lot out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one kind of, I guess it helped me to a certain extent because in writing it and reliving it, I was helping myself understand it and get over it to a certain extent. But the second one, the spiritual book, I mean, that just really helped me. That enlightened me so much. I just reading it though, I thought, who the hell wrote this? You know, I know we get angelic help, and I know
Yeah.
we have guides and angels and everything. You know, there are millions of people around the world that believe in that, you know?
And that was the support you had in the
Yeah,
end, wasn't
knowing
it?
that other
Yeah.
people are on
Yeah.
like-minded. And then I was lucky enough to meet like-minded spiritual people. And so, you know, this is great too, to be able to talk to each other, you know, about our respective ideas and beliefs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how would people connect with you, Jessica, if they do want to connect with you and to be able to talk more about these ideas, not ideas, but all of these findings that you've had in your research about your experiences? Maybe they're looking for some support as well. How would they be able to connect with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook and all of the other social media,
Okay.
so they can connect with me there.
Okay, perfect.
But I still have a longing to maybe rent a room somewhere and talk on a one-to-one with people,
Oh,
because a couple of people have approached me. One was a student, a college student, and when she said, Jessica, you've taught me more in 20 minutes than I've learned all my years of college, I
oh,
thought
wow.
more people need to hear this, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So a couple of things like that happened with some people, and I'd love to be able to do that. But at the moment, I'm marketing, which is no easy job.
No, it isn't.
You know all
It
about that.
isn't.
That,
Yeah.
that is so hard. But I know it's going to take more years of doing this. And, you know, to be honest, I would, even though I get very tired from it, I would rather be active mentally than someone just, you know, stroking the cat and going for walks and going shopping. That
Right.
would be enough for me in my life. I have to be active. And I still
Yeah.
go dancing with friends on a Saturday
Oh,
night.
wow. Amazing. I
Because
love that.
I love dancing and I love music. So, you know, we get
Yeah.
some great bands here in Parksville at the Rocking Horse pub.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, cool.
we get some really good bands. And, you know, you get more aha moments, as Oprah says. That's a show
Yeah.
I'd love to get on, Oprah. Would love her to read that
Oh,
section.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
First Street, that is.
Yeah, that's soul care, right? The singing and the dancing and nature and even just having the quiet time or doing the things that you love. That's good soul care. That's what keeps our soul alive and keeps us moving in a good direction. Thank you so much, Jessica, for being here today and sharing with us. We're going to have the links down below of how to connect with Jessica. I'd love for anyone that's been tuning in to share something in the comments about what stood out for you, what you learned, what you felt inspired by. We would love to hear that in the comments. Thank you all for joining us today on Awaken and Ascend.
All right. Thank you, dear.